John, don't you need to get to work on the next episode?
Yeah.
And don't you usually stop playing the game after you've reviewed it?
Yeah, but didn't I say it was going to take something pretty remarkable to distract me from playing this? I doubt you're going to find anything to pull me away. You have my attention. Okay, looks like it's beat-em-up time again. After 2 fairly long and complicated games, it should be nice to get back into the simple. So here I go, venturing back into Outspark's territory with their newest offering, a violent medieval-themed hack-and-slash. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at DarkBlood. Published in the North American market by Outspark and developed by JCR Soft. Yes, apparently that stupid-looking moon is supposed to be standing in for a J. DarkBlood is an action-heavy 2D hack-and-slash with 3D models, containing plenty of gore, violence, and shamelessness to go around. If your favorite videos of mine were on DFO, Rusty Hearts, or L-Sword, and not because you happen to play one of those 3 games personally and enjoyed nitpicking everything I said, well, you're in luck. Like the aforementioned games, DarkBlood also carries its own story, this time from the people who brought you global warming led to space snowboarding. To reel back some of the convolution, you're a survivor of a great war against demons that once consumed the world. 4 heroes of that war sent you forth in time 500 years to ensure you would live to guarantee the world's safety from the demon's prophesized return. In other words, bad shit happened, go kill monsters. But with time travel. Again, like many games of this type, story isn't exactly the main draw, but there are interesting twists and turns for those who aren't just sprinting through the quest text. Regardless, let's begin. This game's focus seems to dwell upon 3 things: blood, gore, and that. The focus on this kind of perversion is rampant, with lots of cleavage and some of the weirdest breast physics I've seen in a game. It's a hard thing to ignore, and it comes off as rather shameless. Stepping away from that obviousness for a second, and trust me, it's going to become very apparent very soon, let's just talk about the game's aesthetic. This game features a very odd mix of 2D and 3D artwork. The stages and backgrounds are entirely 2D, with multiple layers like you'd see in a 16-bit era game, but detailed much better. In an odd contrast, the character models are fully 3D, both for the enemies and the player characters. Interestingly, the textures and art of the models seem to blend fairly well with the backgrounds. It's hard to explain unless you look at it, so there you go. The models allow for some smoother animations than you'd get with sprite work, but there is still a general jerkiness when you change your character's direction. The models also lend themselves to odd clipping issues with certain armors and animations. This seems to be the fault of being able to adjust certain aspects of your character models, with certain types causing simple but odd issues. Yeah, sure, you just keep clipping right into my stomach like that. Battle is really action-packed, however, with tons of flashy effects and bloody body parts flying everywhere to satisfy fans of violence. I may not be 13 anymore, but this game really speaks to my inner immaturity. If you're a fan of boobs, blood, and something that begins with a B that translates to stylish action spectacle...
Bombastic?
Isn't that usually something to do with writing and speech?
Bombastic action!
Whatever, it works. This is an interesting, if not often chaotic, soundtrack. It's the heavy guitar and industrial tracks you'd associate with the genre, but with a lot of added orchestrations, leaving some songs sounding amazing and others sounding just all over the place. Overall, it really does help to punctuate the action, but the tracks can get repetitive and grating at times. Sound is loud and explosive, and going along with the music makes the game a very loud experience. I ended up turning down most of the effects just so I could converse with anyone nearby without having to shout at them. Characters also have voices for attacks, but the music and sound often drowns them out, and they're oddly quiet compared to the rest. It's an odd contrast to the Korean version of this game, where the voices are so loud they drown out everything else. Everything fits together well, though, but you'll definitely want to fiddle with the volume sliders in this one. When logging in, you'll need to set up a secondary password, which is a 4-digit PIN. This will need to be entered each time you log in, and you have 5 tries to get it right, so try to remember it. The game's server choice is down to 1, Mirror. After selecting it, you have 4 channels to choose from. Unlike other beat-em-up MMOs, channels aren't level restricted, so just pick the one you want. You're taken to the character selection screen, and starting out you'll have none, so click Addition to create one. You've got 4 classes to choose from, with a few blank slots suggesting more might be added later. As of now, it's Warrior, Knight, Hunter, and Mage. The Warrior and Knight are melee classes designated as easy, with the Warrior focusing on massive damaging blows, and the Knight given a more defensive and fast combo-based playstyle. Hunters and Mages focus on ranged attacks, with Hunters focusing on quicker attacks and Mages on nuking the playfield with their spells. Both of those classes are ranked as difficult, as they can't mash X to victory as well as the melee classes would. Classes are gender specific, meaning all the Warriors and Hunters are male, while the Knights and Mages are female. You have a small amount of options to customize the class's appearance, and yes, that includes a chest slider for the women, bringing them from well endowed to dear lord what has science wrought. Yes, the Knight is my favorite class in this game. No, not for the reason you're thinking. Not entirely. After you create your character, you're taken back to the character selection screen where... Oh, come on! Yeah, for some reason you start out with your character in their underwear. This is gonna be one of those games, isn't it? Choosing your character will now take you to the tutorial level, where your character, now clothed, finds themselves in the midst of a massive raid in the demon's castle. Your first task is to retrieve a weapon in the middle of the battle to help fight off the demonic forces. After a while, the 4 legendary heroes of the story will come in to wreak havoc on the demons, and then cast a spell on you to upgrade your power to max level, granting you access to a few skills you wouldn't have until much later, and allowing you to help in battle with ease. The tutorial has an overwhelming amount of enemies to start, and you might find yourself playing a fantastic game of where the hell am I, but it doesn't last too long, as the heroes decide to make one last stand and ensure the safety of the future by tossing you into a massive portal, hurtling you 500 years into the future, and starting an opening movie that has no idea how sound balance works. Seriously, try listening to a word the voiceover says over this entirely too loud music.
The people in Natasha were haunted by the fear of war, and had no option but to continue their painful lives.
When the movie, which is apparently a trailer for the game, has finished, you land on the other side of the portal on a beach, in your underwear. What am I, the Terminator? After that, you'll see a woman attacked by creatures, so you rush naked into the fray until they're all defeated, and you're finally taken back to town and given proper-ish clothing. Control in the game is typical of a beat-em-up. Use the arrows to move, press X to attack, Z to use a special move, C to jump, and spacebar to use a buff skill when you acquire one. Inputting arrow commands before pressing any of these buttons will grant you a differing skill depending on if you have it unlocked, not entirely unlike DFO's system, which I'm admittedly a fan of over the L-Sword and Rusty Hearts methods of slotted skills only. If you want to slot skills, you can place any skill into the A, S, D, F, G, H, Q, W, E, R, T, and Y hotkeys. It's a generous amount, but try not to slot your basic Z special into one of them. It's a complete waste of space. Again, it's best to try to memorize the input commands since it's easy to chain attacks together instead of trying to remember where on the keyboard you're supposed to be pressing. But melee class skills are usually much easier to remember and input than mages and hunters, so use what's easier for you in the long run. You also have item slots that use various number keys, 1 through 6, where you can place potions and various healing items. The game even allows for gamepad control, and I highly encourage it. Even if you're limited to the amount of buttons you can assign, it feels a lot more natural and becomes a lot less tiring in the long run. One major thing to remember is that despite your character controlling a full 3D movement, they can only attack to their immediate left and right, not counting certain AoE skills, of course. It may look like you can attack from any direction like in Rusty Hearts, but this only works like DFO, so unless you're lined up on the side of the enemy, you're gonna miss. I will say the game is far more forgiving with your positioning than Dungeon Fighter Online though, as hitting enemies is much easier and there's no ridiculous miss mechanic. Like the other beat-em-up MMOs, dungeon runs follow the same formula. You move from place to place, encountering enemies and defeating all of them before moving to the next group or area. Once you reach the last room, the boss appears, and if you defeat him, the rest of the enemies in the room die. Your score is totaled, ranging from SSS rank to D rank, and you're given a bonus for completion, the ability to purchase bonus chests if you desire, and have a short amount of time to retrieve the loot left over in the room before the game kicks you back out into the town, where you can leave, restart the dungeon, or head back into the dungeon select screen. It's all tread ground. However, unlike other beat-em-up MMOs, you can't repair your equipment in the dungeon, so you'll have to return to town to repair or stock up on supplies. The repair cost is once again pretty inconsequential. If you're defeated in the game, you have a chance to revive yourself to full health as long as you're carrying continue coins. You start with 10, and if you drop below 3, you can replenish them back to 3 every day you play, and you can buy more in the cash shop. I found it's pretty easy to avoid death early on, but later on attacks can take you down to near nothing before you realize you were even hurting, so keep an eye on your health. Dungeons also tend to have a bit of the occasional hidden area and separate paths, so there's a bit of reward for exploring around before you move on. If you leave a dungeon before completing it, you're given a debuff that halves your defense for 10 minutes, but you can pay a bit of in-game cash called R in this game in order to remove it. This game, like the others, features a standard MMO equipment system. Each class can equip a specific set of armor, as well as one of two weapons, usually one built for speed and the other for power. To check your equipment tab, press U at any time. This equipment can be upgraded in town for a fee if you find certain crystals in the game. Confusion crystals for weapons and pure crystals for armor. Be wary when upgrading equipment, as the higher you go, the more likely you are to fail the upgrade and possibly break the equipment piece. You gain levels in this game through experience points, and leveling up in a dungeon will immediately refill your health and mana to full. You'll also earn a few ability points that you can use to upgrade your character's skill sets. There are two sections for the skill tree, active skills and buffs and passives. Active skills relate to combat. Here's where you can add more attacks to your arsenal or upgrade your current attacks. Some attacks even change their properties rather than just strengthening when boosted to higher levels. For example, the Knight's basic strike skill can perform a second attack when pressing X after using it. But if upgraded to level 6, you earn a third strike and a fourth when you upgrade it 10 times. Other skills can't be unlocked until you reach the appropriate upgrade level with another one. The buff passive tree contains your buff skills and a slew of passives that give small boosts to your attack, health, or defense and the like. Another fun thing you can do in the skill tree is to use the skill script feature, a pointless but fun ability to assign chat commands to skills when cast. For example, like yelling, "I have you now," or "take this" when using a throw skill. You can type whatever you like as long as it's not blocked by the chat filter and fits within the block. To enter the skill tree to upgrade skills, press Ctrl K or click the icon on the bottom of the screen. And to view or assign skills and set up skill scripts, simply just press K. At level 19, each class can change jobs, where you can access a new set of skills and specialize in one weapon type. For example, a knight can choose to be a speedy attack-focused sword-wielding crusader, or a defense and buff-focused hammer-toting paladin. When you start the job quest, you're given 2 of the next job skills for free, and once the quests are complete, your skill points are completely refunded to reassign at your leisure. Also an option unlocked at level 20 is the ability to start crafting, or life skills as this game bafflingly calls them. This consists of picking up a gathering profession and a crafting profession to go with it. Crafting in this game is very loot-focused and requires a ton of material drops to craft even the most basic of items. It's not something you need to focus on, but you can make some fantastic gear with it, so it's your call whether or not you'd want to focus on it. Inventory space is a major issue, and loot drops in massive quantities in dungeon, especially after a boss kill. Your bags will fill up constantly, forcing you to sell after almost every dungeon run. As a tip, you're given one crude bag at the start that adds 5 slots to your inventory, but you can purchase more for a paltry 50 a pop from the item NPC. Do this before you're forced to sacrifice a lot of loot after a boss run. If there's stuff you want to keep but not sell, which, trust me, will end up happening once you've unlocked the ability to craft, you can drop items off the storage NPC in town. Press I to access your inventory at any time. The dungeon loot system is standard for a beat-em-up too. Press X or the attack button when standing over the loot to retrieve it. Unfortunately, like DFO, the game prioritizes loot to attacking, so make sure you're not standing on a piece of loot when you go to attack something, or you'll leave yourself open for an attack when you retrieve the loot instead of swinging your weapon. One common piece of loot is the random box that grants you a random weapon or armor piece within a certain level range. While you have the chance to obtain some high-quality gear out of these, expect to just end up with mostly blue-quality gear. The game's quest system is pretty standard, but it's also one of those systems that has you running all over the place before you get your actual assignment. Although one very interesting feature of the quest system is that occasionally it has the ability to change the outcome or tasks within a certain dungeon, sometimes giving you an NPC or a small patrol to fight alongside you, throwing in special mini-bosses and enemy encounters, opening up entirely new areas of the dungeon, and most interestingly, putting you in the shoes of an entirely different character with their own sets of skills and attacks. While the tasks do end up getting grindy, and you will be seeing the same dungeons over and over while you trek through the main storyline, it's these moments that help break up the monotony of simply running through each stage over and over. While the first few quests guide you through the areas you need to visit by lighting your path with massive green flashing arrows, these vanish later on, and you'll need to use your map system to locate the NPCs you need to speak to. Just press M and look for that character or an exclamation point, and simply click on them to path automatically to that NPC. Unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but this, like Elsword, is another beat-em-up MMO that kept its stamina system, here called Stress. Each room you visit in a dungeon adds to your daily stress meter, and once full, you start to pull from your weekly stress meter. Once that's filled, you can't do any dungeon runs on that character until the stress meter is reset at 6 AM Pacific Standard Time, with the weekly meter resetting on Monday at that same time. If you manage to burn through your daily stress, you earn a prize by accessing your daily calendar, which is done by pressing the quotation mark key and clicking on the chest when the icon appears. You can also earn rewards this way by playing consecutive days and having them marked on the calendar. You only need to burn 20 stress a day to earn a mark. You burn 2 stress every time you start a dungeon and every time you enter a new room in one. Daily stress caps at 150 and weekly stress at 190. Yes, this was a very recent change, and I'll get into it soon. One last reward you get for playing is the Goblin Money slots, a massive ever-changing jackpot up for grabs by the players. When you play dungeons, you earn points toward Goblin coins, and every 100 points grants you a coin. Click on this area to be taken to the slot machine where you have a chance to win a percentage of, or all of, the current jackpot, as well as, a much more likely outcome, free potions. It's really one of the stranger aspects of this game, the fact that it rewards you so much for playing, yet keeps you from playing so much, at least as far as the dungeon runs are concerned. When it comes to playing alongside other players, or against them, well, that's a whole other story to tell. As I am wont to do, let's quickly go over how to set up a dungeon in this game. Like DFO, you have a small area right before the dungeon screen where most people are setting up parties. By default, a list will pop up as you walk into it. They'll contain all the players looking for people to join their groups. Click on one if you wish to join, but if you want to fly solo or just pick up others on your own, close that window and right-click to invite the people you want. Move to the next area to open the dungeon select screen. Click or press up and down to select the dungeon you have unlocked, and press left or right to choose a difficulty you have unlocked. If the dungeon has quests to complete, they will be displayed in the upper right corner. Keep in mind that some must be completed on specific difficulties, and if you see a quest listed on the dungeon itself under a certain difficulty, this is probably one of those quests that will alter the way that dungeon plays out. Some of these may also be only completed solo, forcing you to drop any party you're in order to start it. When grouped, all money is shared regardless of who picked it up. When loot is retrieved, a dice block appears above all party members and the highest roller wins the item. This is the default loot rules, but they can be changed if you desire. My first foray into the game was met with dozens of spammers and not a single person who spoke English. Fortunately, that went away pretty fast when playing later on, and while there was no shortage of spammers, there were plenty of people being talkative. Of course, the game is an extremely wonky chat filter that blocks the most innocuous of phrases, making me wonder if everyone had a filthy mouth until I just tried to say hello to someone who had said hi to me. That's right, you can't say hello because hell. This game has enemies that shatter into bloody meat chunks, and women with breasts so large and disproportionate they have their own laws of gravity and physics. But yeah, saying hell, that's right out. That makes all of the sense. Unlike the character designs, decency exists in this game's community, and I'm honestly a bit surprised by this. The majority of disdain in the game is aimed toward the recent stamina system change, that dropped the amount of stress points even further than the original total, and increased the amount burned with each room. But in trade, severely boosted the amount of loot and XP earned with each dungeon run. While decent news for newer players, the veterans realize that they're being screwed out of being able to farm for materials as much as they used to, and they're not happy about it. Personally, I'm too much of a casual player of these games to care about the stamina limit, but I'll admit it's pretty easy to burn through it in a couple hours. Still, this isn't something I'd want to play for more than a few hours at a time, so it just depends on what you're looking for. There's a few PvP systems in this game, which don't end up using the stamina system. The first unlocked at level 8, where you can choose to duel other players. Keep in mind, the minute you reach level 8, you'll be hard-pressed to run through a town without someone sending you a duel request. I honestly had a lot of fun with the duel system though, and if you get off a massive combo against your opponent, it's especially satisfying. Not so much if you're on the receiving end of one though. There is an odd priority system in place that I'm not entirely sure of the mechanics of. With some fights I could wail away on an opponent without them having even so much as a chance to retaliate, and other times my attacks were always being cancelled out by my opponents not letting me get an attack in edgewise. It seemed to balance out a bit more as I went up in level. Dueling players seem to be decent people, at least those I've gone up against, as I've been complimented by people who I've absolutely trounced, and even those who had thrashed me without much effort. One guy even gave me a rare quality shield after I nearly edged him out in a match. It had nothing to do with my knight's red hair and giant boobs, shut up. Hitting level 20 will allow you access into the arena where you can participate in a more structured PvP and earn good rewards for constant play. Entering the arena will bring you to a menu of matches you can participate in or make your own. If you want to be around a lot of like-minded people, there's a guild system in this game. It's easy enough to join one, or even start one, despite a few limiting restrictions. To start a guild, you'll need a party of at least 3 people, all of whom are level 20 or over, and the party leader can form the guild after paying 100,000 R. Guilds receive perks that carry across all of their members. Money isn't too hard to come by in this game, especially if you make good of the auction house, accessible by the Goblin Trader NPC. You can list 5 items at a time, and all winnings are sent to the mailbox. The mailbox is also accessible in the villages, so visit one if you have messages to retrieve. Also worthy of note, if you have a full inventory, any rewards you gain as an end-of-dungeon bonus will automatically be sent here. You can also use this to send mail between your characters, as you'll notice you'll get a lot of loot drops your character can't use. GMs are very involved with this game as well, holding random GM events, and I've even seen them standing around areas challenging players to duels. It's cool to see this many GMs so actively involved in the game beyond the usual yelling at people and ignoring help request tickets. One final feature I want to mention in community is something I hadn't seen in a beat-em-up MMO before, and that's emote chat commands. Usually seen in more standard world MMOs, this is where you can perform an action by typing a command such as /wave or /applause to have your character do the animation. A loading screen tip actually informs you to type /dance and to keep the sound on when you do it, so let's just try this one out right now. Well, that didn't work.
Oh, it says here you actually have to type it as /dancing.
Oh, so the loading screen tip was wrong. Well, that's fantastic. Let's see. Still not working.
The D in dancing is capitalized.
That is oddly specific. Alright, fine, let's try this out, and... Alright, here we go, and... Oh god, what have I done? The cash shop is a bit on the confusing side, and like Outspark's other games, is contained entirely on their website. Foremost items consist of what they call avatar items, which are essentially aesthetic tweaks. Oddly enough, you really can't purchase new costume pieces, and most of those are earned in-game, as the shop only has fortune boxes, grab bags that might have a costume piece in them. If you're looking for more costume options, you might just be better off looking in the auction house. You can also preview these costumes in the beauty shop, which is also reachable from the shop tab. While you can't purchase any of them here, you can at least see what they'd look like on your character. You can also alter your original character creation options for a hefty fee of in-game currency, like readjusting a body slider costs nearly 3 million R. There's a system to recolor your avatar's armor pieces and hair in this game, but it's extremely strange. I don't want to say it's random, but it might as well be for the way it works. There are 3 types of dye in this game: Ordinary, High Class, and Top Class, each costing more cash shop points than the last. The first 2 classes show you a jumbled color palette, and you're tasked to select a small portion of it. A mid-sized square for Ordinary and a small square for High Class. Top Class dyes give you a normal-looking color palette and a small square to select with. Once you've chosen the spot on the palette with the square, a small minigame starts where a cursor will bounce around randomly and you have to press stop before the timer runs out to select the color you want. This is much harder than it seems, even with top class dyes, and with an Ordinary, it's possible you'll end up so far off target you'll get a color you never intended. The first time I tried to dye my knight's hair to red, I ended up with green hair. You really can't be further off on the color wheel. Once selected, the dye is used up and gone, regardless of the outcome. You'll have to buy a new one if you want to try again. Otherwise, the shop doesn't contain any instant win items, and mostly has convenience items, like personal merchants for selling, buying more slots for storage at the auction house, more coins for continuing when you die, and finally, when you reach level 40, there's items to go with the in-game pet system I didn't cover because, well, I didn't get to level 40. Nothing here is a real requirement, so shop around if you're interested. If you like beat-em-ups, you might warm up to this game pretty fast. Sure, the aesthetic of the character creator and opening might be a bit off-putting, but once the action gets rolling, the game becomes a lot of fun. Still, the stamina system can be a bit stifling, but if you're not looking to spend all day playing a game and like hopping in every now and again just with a few friends, there's a lot of enjoyment to be had in DarkBlood. Here's my final rating. Part and parcel of the genre, this is a very casual and very easy game to play that can be realistically played in small bursts to get a quick action fix. The combat is some of the more flashy and visceral I've seen in this genre as well, giving good mix to aspects I've enjoyed in all the games like it that I've looked at before. It's nice to know that if your stress meter fills up, you can still have a bit of fun dueling other players or participating in PvP as well. As another part of the genre, this game isn't keen on customization, despite giving you a bit more options than other beat-em-ups. If you want to change up that look a bit more, give the dye system a shot, at your own risk. The rest aren't exactly game-changing items, but if you plan on sticking around, getting a personal merchant to better rid yourself of unwanted gear, or even some more auction house slots might be a decent investment. Yeah, this whole thing. It's a hard sell to get certain people into the game when you have character models this shameless. Starting out, I was honestly looking over my shoulder like I was afraid of being caught when I was playing this, and even though the combat doesn't dwell on this as much, it might be a bit of a deterrent for some. Combat, though, is extremely violent, and depending on what side of the fence you're sitting on when it comes to gallons of blood and violence will be another deciding factor when choosing this game over a similar title. Again, I've stated dozens of times in other videos, beat-em-ups are very repetitive, and if you don't like the gameplay, this is not going to be any different. This is bogged down worse by the quests that will send you into the same areas over and over, and several dungeons look so similar you'll be hard to tell them apart at first glance. If you value variety, this beat-em-up isn't going to have it, but then again, which ones do? Alright, next time, you know, I actually haven't been keeping up with MMO news lately, ever since MMO Underground went off on a hiatus. So, let me just see if there's anything interesting going on. Oh, that'll work. Okay, just real quick here. You know, there's certain things that people know me for that I've done, and, you know, it's just something that happens when people think of my name. Especially if you've come from that guy with the glasses. And if you haven't, and you know me just through MMO Grinder, that's great, that's fine, but I'm probably going to piss a lot of you off right now. See, there's the whole idea of catchphrases. I don't like them, and it's just not something I like to do. It's easy, you hinge on it, but there's just times that, you know, the whole reason you come up with these things is because there are things that need to be said, and just looking at this, there's really only one thing that can be said. Tits don't work that way!